This morning, it is 9 minutes past 8. I have Dr. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. This is our first time together for the new year. Good morning, Dr. John.
Yeah, good morning, Mick.
It's great to have you back again. And look, Dr. John, being a new year, it's probably a great time to start with talking a little bit about CMI, Creation Ministries International, about who you are, what you do, particularly with, we've talked about it before, but there's new people that tune in over the years, and a great time to talk about who you are, what you do.
Yes, and that's right, Mick, and that's what I'd like to start off with this year. But I'd also like to emphasise from the beginning, what we'd really love is for listeners to text in their questions. You know, we really want that because, as everybody who is a regular listener knows, we talk about current events and current scientific discoveries and things like that, but we're really interested in what interests our listeners. So using that text line would be great.
Yes, and that is 0401 949 949. 0401 949 949. And if Dr. Don can't get to it this week, he'll get to it next week. Quite a few of them, the simple ones we can get to this week, or sometimes he has to check out the CMI website and come back to it next week, or sometimes it takes a more detailed explanation. And Dr. John does know most things. He's a pretty smart dude, Dr. John.
Well, look, I really thought it was a good idea too to kick off the new year with a summary of what we're really all about at Creation Ministries, because when we start talking about all of these other news items and so on, it's pretty easy to get lost and to forget what the main thrust is. Yep. But what we are really on about at Creation Ministries, our big focus is the truth of the Bible. That's what it is. The truth of the Bible from beginning to end. And the beginning, of course, the history described in those early chapters, we emphasise the truth of that, because if any part of the Bible can be shown to be in error, then that puts a question mark over every part of it. Yep. And of course, the part that we don't want any question marks over is the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Because when we're talking about the history of the world, that is by far the most important history. You can know about anything else, but if you don't know the truth of the life, death and resurrection of Jesus and have that in your heart, then you're not really looking at a great eternity. Eternal salvation only comes from faith in him and belief in his resurrection. And his resurrection proves that there is life after death. So we want people to be absolutely rock solid in their certainty about the truth of Jesus and his resurrection. And that's why we go to the start of the Bible, and we make sure that people really understand that what it says in the beginning is absolutely true. Now, nobody seems to have too much of a problem about the history of the Jews from Abraham to New Testament times. The academics might argue about a date here and there, or whether so-and-so was a historical figure, but that doesn't really bother the average person very much. That doesn't particularly interest them. But it's those first 11 chapters in the book of Genesis, the first book in the Bible, they are the ones that really stir up contention, because those chapters talk about the creation of the world, the creation of the animal kingdom, the creation of the human race, beginning with an original pair, Adam and Eve. And the Bible clearly tells us that that original creation was perfect until that original pair of human beings disobeyed God's direct command. Yes. Now, we call that original sin, and that corrupted the entire creation. And that meant the entry of death, because there was no death before that. Disease and the aging process began, and carnivory amongst the animals. And of course, the former perfect nature of humanity changed from being God-centered to self-centered. And that's what we call the fall and the entry of sin.
Absolutely. You're with Dr. John this morning from Creation Ministries International. He's explaining a little bit about CMI, who they are, what they do, and of course we're answering your questions. Simply text them through to the text line 0401 949 949. Those questions can be anything to do with, say, dragons or extraterrestrials or creation or evolution or pretty much anything. Just send your questions through 0401 949 949. In the studio with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. They also have a website, creation.com, where you can get answers to pretty much any question you have to do with evolution, creation, even aliens. Creation Ministries' mission is to support the effective proclamation of the gospel by providing credible answers that affirm the reliability of the Bible, in particular, its Genesis history. Now, Creation has got many people around the world doing what Dr. John does, that is talking to churches and in some cases radio stations, and so many of the people around the world are scientists and people who I guess have a credible background, understand what they're talking about. And of course you too, Dr. John, you weren't just an ordinary doctor. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a Christian and got into CMI?
Yeah, well, I am a medical doctor. I had a career in the Navy for a start as a medical officer, and my big interest then was in diving and submarine escape. So, I certainly focused on that. Mm-hmm. And because I was involved in research institutes in that field, I used to read a lot of the scientific magazines, and particularly things like Scientific American and New Scientist and so on. And I became a Christian in my mid-30s. My medical course had convinced me that evolution was the way to go. Mm. And I had a fairly dramatic conversion experience and realised that I had been wrong all along, and that Jesus really was true and he had risen from the dead.
How did that make you feel after years of studying?
Look, it was absolutely mind-blowing and life-changing. Mm-hmm. That's all you can say. But then I had to make a start of I wanted to read the Bible and find out what it says, because I really didn't know much about it at all. Mm-hmm. And, of course, as you do, you start at page 1, and it didn't take me long to realise that what the Bible was saying about creation and when it happened and so on was completely different from what I'd been taught. I believed the world was billions of years old, and it was pretty obvious to me that this was saying no, it's only a matter of thousands of years old. Yep. So I started asking questions, and I didn't really get the right answers, because the people that I asked were saying, it doesn't matter about the millions and billions of years and all that sort of thing. But yep. I could see as a former atheist that, if the Bible was supposed to be true, then it really did matter. Yep. And I could see that the Bible was saying that the earth was only about 6,000 years old. Anybody can add up the years. It's not hard. And I could then see that after, there was this entry of sin into the world, and the world became corrupted, and then God destroyed it by this worldwide flood, about 1,500 years later. And the people that I talked to didn't seem to believe that.
And of course, somebody like you that's spent so many years studying, and then even once you'd become a doctor, you were still studying, learning more about scientific ways of escaping subs and all those sorts of things. So your life had a lot to do with study, or study was a big part of your life. So I assume you kept on studying once you'd read that stuff.
Well, of course, my focus for study became biblical.
Yes.
And so I did some theological qualifications as well. But, when I was puzzling about all of this, I came across Creation Ministries International. It wasn't known by that in the early stages, but that and a couple of books about how the flood of Noah changed our whole world, made it completely different from what it was at the original creation. That was the thing that really, really opened my eyes, and I could see how it all fitted in. And so I've been with Creation Ministries International for 40 years now, so I've really learnt so much out of the sort of material that they have published. And when you see it and when your eyes are opened, then you absolutely see the futility of evolutionary belief. It doesn't have any evidential backing. Now, that might sound surprising to our listeners, because if you look at what the world teaches, then you would think that they must have a lot of evidence for belief in evolution in these billions of years. But when you actually delve down into it, when you dig right down into the bottom of it, you see that it doesn't have any foundation at all. It's all speculation, it's all belief, and it's not founded on evidence. And when you look at the evidence, what you can see is that the evidence absolutely fits the Bible story. It's just amazing. And I think so many of the secular scientists are just in denial. They don't they look at things like DNA, and they don't see how impossible it is for a program like DNA to evolve. It just couldn't happen.
Yes.
But they convinced themselves that it did. And the reason they convinced themselves it did is they don't want to have God in the picture. That's the wicked heart of man, actually. We do not want to bow the knee to a sovereign creator God. And so we'll believe anything that gets him out of the picture.
Absolutely. And of course, last time we spoke about a story. They were talking about the origin of man and how scientists have got it wrong all these years. And so, that last story we spoke about, they'd come up with a new origin, just like that. In one day, they've gone, look, we've just realised we're wrong because the scientific evidence that we had proposed is wrong. But this is the new one. And it's like, whoa, that was a massive change, a quick 180 on the spot. And, of course, the story from the Bible, well, that doesn't change. And there's so much evidence to support it. We'll be back with Dr. John shortly. If you do have any questions, of course, you can always go to creation.com, their website. But we'd prefer that you send the questions to us. Dr. John would love to answer them. Just text them through to 0401 949 949. We're with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International, who answers your questions. If you text them through to 0401 949 949. You can't call us on that line. It's just a text line. Now, of course, this morning we've been talking to Dr. John a bit about CMI, who they are and what they do, and a bit about Dr. John's life, and of course how he changed his faith from one faith to another faith at around age 30. Did plenty of study first up to believe in, the atheist's position, which is the scientific position, which isn't really all science, and of course the creationist position. And Dr. John, tell us a little bit about the difference between evolution and creation.
Yes, well, look, what most people don't appreciate, I think, is, because they're constantly told otherwise, is that the belief in evolution is not a scientific position. It's a faith position. And what we observe is that it is really just atheism dressed up in a white lab coat. That's all it is, because right from the beginning it was an attempt to get God out of the picture. And the reason why evolutionary belief was embraced so readily after Darwin was for that very reason, because it gives a semi-plausible explanation of origins that doesn't include God. And that's what the secular world really wants. People do not want to have God in the picture. I think we've mentioned before that Richard Dawkins helped to finance some signs on London buses saying there's probably no God, so relax and enjoy yourself. As if accountability to a creator God is inhibiting to your behaviour, and I guess in one sense it is. But that's really why evolution is just atheism dressed up in a lab coat. And we try to show that it is not a scientific belief. It is a faith position. So we're talking about the difference between two faith positions, a faith position believing in the truth of the Scripture and a faith position believing in the truth of evolution and long ages. So that's why what you mentioned before about how it's forever changing, more discoveries, they still get shoehorned into the basic evolutionary belief. The belief itself is never questioned. Nothing can be ever allowed to rock that evolutionary boat. So it doesn't matter how the new discoveries don't fit, they will get shoehorned into it to make it fit. Yes. Because it's essential to keep God out of the picture as far as the evolutionists are concerned.
Absolutely. Now, I remember last year sometime, Dr. John, you said that, for a scientist it's important to have a record. My finding is older than somebody else's because that's how they get funding. And you said it will continue. We'll continue to see something will be older than something else. Just over the last month or so, since you've been gone, there's been numerous stories about, the origin of this is older and that was older and we found something older. Yet they're talking, hundreds of thousands and millions of years. Whilst they make it sound as though it's absolute, we found something older, it's really hard, and I've read a lot of the articles, to find anything. What did they use to measure that time? And the information there is thin on the ground.
Very thin on the ground, and we'll talk about that one morning too, about how things actually get dated, because there is no way of directly measuring a date. But that's a topic that's going to take a whole morning, so we'll leave that to another time. But there have been some announcements in the secular press over the last couple of days that really are examples of absolutely atrocious journalism. And I know you read one of these as well. But really, there was an article about, I think it was NASA. NASA had announced that they are close to confirming alien life on Jupiter's moon Europa.
Yeah, they actually say it's imminent and inevitable, which is quite interesting.
I mean, that's absolutely based on evolutionary assumptions, because they believe that wherever there are the ingredients that would support life, then the evolution of life is inevitable. But to say that they're close to it, and close to confirming alien life, and when you actually read the article, what it said was that NASA is preparing a space probe that I think they're going to call Europa, Europa Clipper, I think it is.
Yep.
And they're aiming to send that to Jupiter's moon Europa by the year 2030.
Yes.
Now, we're only just into 2020, so to say that they're close to confirming alien life, you wouldn't want to hold your breath, would you? It's, there's a bit of a difference between 2020 and 2030. But they are very keen on doing that, and even the European Space Agency is going to send a probe up there as well, and they're going to get there, they believe, by 2029.
Yes.
But it's still a fair way off. And what are they trying to find? They're trying to find microbes, right? Because that would be evidence of life outside our world. But of course, because they believe that there's water and an energy source and perhaps some organic chemical compounds on those those moons of Jupiter, and the other one of Saturn called Enceladus. Because they believe that the ingredients are there, then they believe that something evolving would be inevitable. But of course, even a bacterium needs to have DNA or RNA in it, and that's a program, and you can't evolve programs. Now, we're not saying, of course, that life outside our world is impossible. We do think it's very unlikely. Now, even the secular world admits that our Earth is in what they call a Goldilocks zone. That is, absolutely everything is perfect here for life. But because the universe is so huge, then they believe that there must be other places in the universe, other planets that are also in a Goldilocks zone, and therefore, because they believe that evolution has occurred on Earth, then they believe it's inevitable that it's occurred elsewhere, wherever the conditions are right. But as far as we're concerned, they would have to be specifically created, and there are some reasons why we think that's unlikely as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, these guys are even setting it up to have a stab at the church. One of the sentences in that story was, "And finding living creatures, even microbes outside Earth, may have huge social, religious and scientific implications." So they're ready to take on the religious side of things, even though you say unlikely. I can imagine the headlines if they ever found a microbe, but as you say, I don't think it's going to happen. And it's 4 minutes to 9. I'm with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. Dr. John's told us a bit about CMI. He's told us a bit about his past and how he became a Christian and got into CMI. And then, of course, we've talked a little bit about, alien life, or life on other planets anyway. Very interesting, Dr. John.
Yes, Mick, and we'll probably have to expand on some of these topics in later talks as well, because it's very difficult to cover it all in a single session. But I'm glad that we've now got a couple more to go on with next week. We've had a few texts.
Yes, another text came in regards to Old Testament, New Testament beliefs, which will be interesting as well.
Yeah, all right. It's going to be an interesting year, Mick. I think we've got, the world is changing around us, and people's beliefs and people's acceptance of what is normal in relationships is changing. But the Word of God doesn't change. And so there's some of the things that we'll have to address as well.
Absolutely. You are on 94.9. We've just been with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. You can go to creation.com to get any answers for any of your burning questions. Or, of course, we'd really love for you to text them through to us, 0401 949 949. I can forward those texts to Dr. John, and he can answer them next week or, within the coming weeks. Thank you again, Dr. John. Awesome having you here, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah, good. See you next week, Mick. It'll be great to be back again.
Absolutely. You're on 90.